My name is Michelle Kilmer. I'm an assistant professor at the Eleanor Mann School of Nursing. And it is my privilege to get to introduce Dr. Temple Grandin tonight. I asked her, do I have to read your bio or can I speak from the heart? And she said, you can speak from the heart, and that made me thrilled. So if you want to read all about what she's done, it's in here. But I wanted to tell about Dr. Grandin from my point of view. But first, I also want to thank Dr. Morgan Yorty and Dr. Allison Scott and Ms. Kyrie Henry for doing amazing work and sharing their stories with us today as well. It's been a wonderful symposium, and it's a blessing to be a part of it. The fact that you're here tonight to hear Dr. Grandin shows just how much one person can influence the world. One person can have such a strong influence on many people's lives. And I don't know if you've seen the documentary of her life. And if you haven't, I encourage you to watch it. It's amazing. But there's a part in the documentary that I actually asked her yesterday, did that really happen? The theme of the documentary is about doors and having those doors open. And the doors represent opportunities. And sometimes doors can be scary when we don't know what's on the other side of the door. And there was one part in the end of her movie where she's in, I believe it was Piggly Wiggly, and she needed to go from inside to outside. And the sliding doors were intimidating. And so she was looking at them and she was watching them. And a sweet lady came up and said, do you want help to go through the door? And she said, yes. And so the lady stepped in front of the sensor. The door opened. Dr. Grandin walked through. The lady walked through, and Dr. Grandin's character said, I did it. And the lady said, and I held it open for you. And I love that scene because to me, all of us are staring at doors that are intimidating to open. And we all look to people who can open those doors and walk through those doors with us. But many of us here tonight have the ability to be the person who opens the door for others. Many of us here tonight can make a big difference in our community here in Northwest Arkansas just by joining together and opening doors for those in our community. So I thank Dr. Grandin for the doors that she's opened for me in my life, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce her to the podium tonight. Dr. Temple Grandin.
Well, it's great to be here tonight. Got lots of things to talk about, animal behavior. And since this meeting was about service dogs, they wanted me to talk about animal behavior. And one of the things that helped me in my work with animal behavior is I'm a total visual thinker. All my memories are pictures. So my very first work with cattle, I got down into the chutes to see what cattle were seeing, and they'd be afraid of shadows. They'd be afraid of reflections, a coat on a fence, things that we tended to not notice. Now the thing is, an animal lives in a sensory-based world. You want to understand an animal, you got to get away from verbal language. What is it smelling, hearing, touching? This is how it stores its memories. And I found this fascinating study from Cornell University where they found out that the dog's nose was directly connected to the visual cortex. How about smell pictures? Smelling in 3D? Isn't that trippy? They have a smell world we can only imagine. Like to sort of understand animal sensory-based world, I really like this book, The Immense World. The octopus lives in a complete touch-based world. Now, that's a picture a young autistic man sent to me who showed how he thinks about in pictures. And when I was young, I thought everybody thought in pictures. I didn't know until I was in my late 30s that people also thought in language. I didn't know that. I do a whole nother talk where I just talk about different kinds of thinking. And the first step is to realize that different people think differently. Some are visual thinkers, some are mathematical thinkers, some are word thinkers, and some are mixtures. Now, the thing about something new is attractive if the animal can voluntarily approach it. It's scary when you shove it in their face. This is the same thing with autistic kids. Surprises scare. I did a talk to dentists. Now, anything you can do to make this thing interesting, like watching other people do it. I used to be terrified of airplanes because I was in a very scary emergency landing. And then when they made aviation interesting, then it's not so scary when it's made interesting. So this is the reason why you got to take a service dog around everywhere. You got to get it used to everything so that nothing scares it. Because new things are frightening when they're just suddenly introduced. You want to reduce that surprise factor. Now, a lot of dogs today are leading way too sheltered a life. There's more problems now with them being terrified of the veterinarian because they're not getting handled by strange people. They're not getting out and doing enough things with many different kinds of people. There was a study done recently that showed that dogs that often feared the veterinarian also tended to be afraid of new situations. You think about it, all the leash laws, dogs aren't getting to run around, socialize with other dogs. I see dogs being yanked away from the tree they want to smell. They don't get to do doggy stuff. Now, just to show you what a visual thinker animals are, one of my graduate students, Megan Corrigan, did a really great study that will explain why a horse sometimes spooks for no reason. Now, when you look at this child's play set, see how different it looks when it's rotated. So you're getting an animal used to something new. You need to make sure they see all sides of it. And what Megan did is she led fillies and colts by this play set till they no longer stopped, no longer put the head up, no longer flared the nostrils. And when the play set was rotated, it became a new object. Now, this was all done at a walk. I also kind of repeated this experiment with a green chair with Western riders just walking by it. And when it was rotated, half the horses came to a hard stop. Let's look, you train a horse, for example, to tolerate a blue and white umbrella. That doesn't transfer to tarp. You see how different they look? You see, because it's stored in the memory as a picture or a specific sound. Now, here's an entrance going into a cattle chute. Look at how the shadows change throughout the day. You know, where there's no shadows, everything's working fine. And then in the afternoon, you start getting these shadows, and then the animals are afraid of it. So I was looking at what cattle were seeing. Here they're headed right straight into the blinding sun. They were afraid of that. I saw a dog the other day at the Denver airport, absolutely terrified of the escalator. And the guy just dragged the dog onto it. I wouldn't have done that. You know, let him look at that thing. Because if you have a really bad first experience with something new, that animal might have a problem with escalators. You know, let's try to introduce that a little more gently. And this dog was absolutely frightened like this. And the guy just dragged him on. Then he acted okay once he got on it. I didn't see him when he got off. Now, here's a big shadow that cattle are afraid of. I get asked all the time. They know they're going to get slaughtered. Well, that shadow wasn't there in the morning. Everything was fine. And when that appeared in the afternoon, cattle didn't want to walk over that. Seeing cars through the fence, they notice little things that kind of shouldn't be there. Little details in the environment. Autistic kids do the same thing. Like if there's one pixel wrong on an electronic sign, I notice it. I'll say to other people, did you see that sign, that United Airlines sign was corrupted? No, they didn't see that. We were walking into the airport, some airport somewhere, and they were using big TVs for signs, and one of them had some jagged lines in it. And I instantly noticed that. Chains hanging down. Cattle notice little details. You know, so do autistic kids. Little details. And here's a situation where cattle could see a truck loading. This particular place had two different identical facilities. But one of them had a view of the truck, the other one didn't. And I said, well, did you see that truck there? And they're going like this. You see, as a visual thinker, that's obvious. Turns out I've got a huge visual thinking circuit in my head. Now, one of the things I cannot do is algebra. I'm an extreme visual thinker. People like me are good with animals, art, anything mechanical, and building mechanical things. And when I was out in the meat plants working on supervising construction of some of my equipment, I worked with skilled tradespeople that were brilliant at inventing and patenting mechanical things that were definitely either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. Those kids are playing video games in the basement when they need to be over at Tyson fixing their stuff. You see, there's a relation here because the people that I worked with, they have retired out. They're not getting replaced. I call them the clever engineering department. And there's situations where we're losing skills. Right now, for a brand new poultry processing plant, you got to buy the equipment from Europe. So it goes back to their education. 9th grade, you go university or you go tech. We tend to stick our nose up at tech. But the thing about those tech jobs is they're going to be artificial intelligence proof. Those are the jobs that are not going to get replaced by computers. And one of the problems I have is I have very, very bad working memory. If people go yakety yak, 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 I can't remember long strings of verbal instruction on how to do something with a sequence. I'm going to need a pilot's checklist. This would save a ton of jobs. Okay, steps for closing out the cash register. Put it in a pilot's checklist. Things you have to do that day. Write it down. The other thing is for first jobs, let's avoid the chaotic multitasking stuff. Yep, let's get these kids working. Where I'm seeing a big problem now in autism is these fully verbal kids are not making the transition to work. They're getting way too kind of babied. They're not learning shopping. They're not getting out and doing things. Let's talk about some things we can do with sensory. Okay, child hates the vacuum cleaner. Let the kid play with it. When they initiate the sound, I've seen vacuum cleaners go from the most feared thing to a favorite toy. When the kid turns the sound on. Same thing with things like electric drills. And the problem is, if you wear headphones all the time, you're going to get more sensitive. But you want to have them with you all the time. Like the fire alarm went off 3 times last night in the hotel. I had a horrible night last night. Well, that's a place for headphones. Absolutely, definitely. But if they're worn all the time, the sound sensitivity can get so bad you can't tolerate conversation. Another thing that bothers some people is LED lights that flicker. You can whip that phone out, take some pictures in slow motion, you'll find the LED lights that don't flicker. And some individuals will complain that the print jiggles on the page. It's only a subgroup of dyslexia. Try some pale colored papers, like light blue, light tan. I've seen that save college careers. And somebody might say, well, that's not evidence-based. It's just paper. It can't hurt you. It costs almost nothing to try it, and you'll know in 5 minutes. Yeah, go ahead and try it. If something's expensive, time-consuming, possibly dangerous, yeah, I got to have evidence-based. But those are some very, very, very simple accommodations. Now, this is the different kinds of minds. And I talk about this in my book, Visual Thinking. And then I also have a young reader's edition on different kinds of minds. And there's scientific research that shows that these different kinds of thinking exist. I'm an object visualizer. I can't do algebra. There's nothing to visualize. Maybe I ought to take business math so I don't take out a stupid loan and lose my shop. That actually happened to one of the people. And object visualization and then the pattern thinker, music and math, are actually different kinds of thinking. One thinks in patterns and one thinks in pictures. Now, a lot of people are mixtures of the different kinds of minds. But you get a kid autistic, he might be an extreme object visualizer or an extreme mathematician. And one of the bad things I'm seeing with the math kids, and I just ran into 3 cases in the last couple of weeks, elementary school kids that aren't allowed to do harder math. They make them do the same baby math over and over and over again, and then they turn into baby problems. And then you've got the verbal thinkers, thinking in words. And there's some autistic people, they're verbal thinkers, memorize all the facts about a certain sport or a certain type of movie. And they can often be really good at jobs like specialized retail. There's been some real successes with selling cars, selling business insurance, selling sporting goods, helping people to pick out the right product for them rather than just shoving the most expensive stuff down their throats. Well, let's talk about how to ease into the workplace because it's a different skill. Granddads come up to me all the time and they tell me they're on the spectrum. They find that out and the kids get diagnosed. But that granddad or that grandmother had a paper route, learning how to work at age 11. These kids have got to learn how to do a job outside the family. Let's walk dogs for the neighbors for Mr. Jones. Let's have a church volunteer job. where somebody outside the family is a boss. And then this instant they're legal, they need to get real jobs. And I want to avoid the multitasking chaos stuff. I want to avoid that. I'll put them on the takeout window at lunchtime. That's not going to work. Let's put them in jobs where things are going to work and get them working before they graduate from high school. Mother got me a sewing job when I was 13 years old, just with a local seamstress that worked out of her home. There's all kinds of opportunities like that. You're just not seeing them. All right, getting back to animals, this horse got terrified of black cowboy hats. White cowboy hats were fine, but he'd been abused by somebody wearing a black cowboy hat. See, these fear memories can get very, very specific. Black hats were bad. Now, I think if I'd put my big black purse on top of my head, I think he would have been afraid of that too. There's some generalization. Another basic thing is if an animal gets all upset, it takes 20 minutes to calm back down. That's going to be true for an autistic kid in full meltdown. And we had some horses that a news photographer terrified with a drone. And I timed it. It took exactly 20 minutes for those horses to become rideable. I timed it. Now, there's a movement in veterinary medicine called fear-free. Let's make going to the vet a good experience. Your first experience going to the vet, pets and treats and things like that. Give the dog a non-slip floor. Let's get away from just holding them down and forcing it. There's been a lot of improvements in how livestock have been handled. I've worked on improving that. And now the fear-free method, started by Marty Becker, that's getting more and more popular. Now, the thing about some of these new techniques, to learn them, it'll be slower in the beginning. There's going to be a learning phase. The other thing I found, at least with the animal stuff, well, there's certain people that like to be mean to animals, probably shouldn't be there. It's one of the things that I learned in all the work I did on fixing slaughterhouses. All right, for the people that think you ought to force it, here's a lion voluntarily getting a nail trim as he's fed meatballs. I showed that at a veterinary conference. That blows a few minds. Now, some of these dogs are getting really stressed out. Ones that are home alone, eating up the house, super impulsive. They're turning gray prematurely just from the stress. This is work done by Camille King, really good scientist, has a dog training business. And I helped her on a paper. She did all the work. I just worked on making sure the method section was good. Okay, fear is the main emotion in autism. All this anxiety. My amygdala was 3 times bigger than normal. I've been on antidepressant medication since my early 30s. Best thing that happened. And in my book, Thinking in Pictures, my earlier book, I described my experiences with antidepressants. And the mistake that's often made with antidepressants is too high a dose. Forget the label. It's starter dose or less. And even though that book's 26 years old, the information is still accurate. The drugs really haven't changed. So I'm one of these people that was greatly helped by medication. But there's way too many meds given out to kids like candy. I'm just horrified. And then when you find out, well, why'd you do this drug or that drug? I found out no thought went into it. It was just, 7 drugs on an 8-year-old. That's completely disgusting. But on the other hand, the antidepressants help me. I'm very concerned about this high potency marijuana, THC levels that's way above 7 times what we had. There's bad stuff going on with teenagers. I stay away from all that stuff. All right, let's get back to pets. An animal can either be a high fear or low fear animal genetically. What does that mean? Where you're going to see that difference is when something scares the animal. It suddenly gets input in a new situation, like cargo hold of a plane, in a really bad place. The animal that is the high fear genetics will get more scared than the animal with the low fear genetics. Now, in some of the scientific literature, they call it bold and shy, but that's the same thing. High fear, low fear. And so there are genetic differences in the tendency to get scared easily. Autistic kids tend to be the ones that get scared easily. And, the dogs that were less fearful didn't get as sick in the animal shelter because they weren't so fearful. Do animals have emotions? Yes, they do. Prozac works on dogs. They definitely have emotions. And here's an interesting paper that was done in horses. And horses got domesticated when 2 small genetic changes happened, where basically I call this the Prozac gene. You got more serotonin, so they were easier to tame, and they had another gene that helped reduce back pain. Then all of a sudden, horses got domesticated. All right, let's look at animal emotions. These are the basic emotional systems. All animals and people have got it. The Jack Penskep emotional systems. You have fear. It also can be called bold or shy. It's the same thing. You can have anger. And then you have separation distress. That's different than fear. That's when the animal's by itself. Humans would be similar to grief. Separation anxiety is a different emotion than fear. And then you have seeking, which is either high or low exploration. Okay, one Labrador, you put it in this room, he's going to sniff every wall in here. Another one's not that interested. Not a high seeker. And then, of course, you got the sex drive, you got the mother-young nurturing, and then you've got play. All mammals have these. And this is where, when it comes to people, we're the same on this. The main difference is we got raw computer power sitting up here. We got warehouses full of servers up here. Maybe the dogs just got a quarter of a warehouse. We've just got more raw computer power sitting on top. And the thing is, both environment and the genetics affect behavior. There's sometimes a lot of fights on that. But the fear that I had, and I found this paper back about the antidepressant drugs years ago about endogenous anxiety. It simply means within. But my nervous system was all revved up like there was lions all over the place. Well, there weren't any lions. It was definitely genetic. And I don't know what would have happened to me if I hadn't taken the antidepressants. That's why I have to drink quite a lot of water. My health was horrible. I was eating yogurt and Jell-O all the time because the colitis was ripping me apart. And when I went on the antidepressant, within 2 weeks, the colitis had not totally cured, but it 90% reduced. All right, let's give the puppy a non-slip floor to stand on. I like to show that to vet students. And I say, well, now raise your hand if you saw that dog was in a brace position. See, a lot of people don't notice that. Let's give it a non-slip floor. Bring in a bath mat from home that the puppy's used to, put it on the table. Animals have emotions. I love the work of Gregory Burns. And Gregory Burns trained dogs to lay still in the MRI scanner. And when they smell their favorite person, the emotion centers all light up. Yeah, they've definitely got emotions. Now, what about pain? Yes, animals do feel pain. And they'll do the self-medication. If their leg is injured, they will self-medicate something that tastes terrible to relieve the pain. Yeah, they definitely feel pain. I find it hard to believe that somebody wouldn't think they'd feel pain. Now, let's talk about nonverbal autistics and medical stuff. Okay, we're having meltdowns, we're having problems. Let's look at how we can troubleshoot this. Now, I'm not talking 3-year-olds here. I'm talking older children and adults. No way to communicate. Frustration because they can't communicate. Sensory overload. Okay, like the fire alarm. Boy, let me tell you, that hotel's got one horrible fire alarm for sound. Everybody's going outside because they couldn't stand it. Well, that would be sensory overload. And then the one that's being missed all the time is hidden, painful medical problem. There's a tendency with medical professionals lots of times to get so hung up in the autism, they don't treat the heartburn or some other problem that the individual's got. I got to talk to a man the other day on the phone, and the kid was grabbing his face and had attacked him. And I said, well, if you make sure he has an ear infection, check him for a sinus infection, for toothache, you've got to rule this stuff out. And that hadn't been done. Now, let's look at what dogs need. Dogs need people. I really like this study. One of my students did this. Dogs came into the animal shelter, and if they, half of them got to have fun to play with my student, and the other half just got stuck in a cage, and the next day the cortisol levels were lower. You got to keep doing that all the time. You got dogs in the animal shelter, then you have volunteers come in and give each dog a good fun time, 45 minutes a day, take them out, walk them, play with them. Now, here's a dog park that actually really worked. I never saw so many kids and so many animals having so much fun. I didn't see a single phone in sight. And they provided tennis balls to play with. No outside toys allowed because they didn't want to have resource guarding in there. It had an open bar. They had a bar there. They sold drinks. And animals don't seem to relate to drinks on resource guarding, but no food was allowed in there, either pet treats or people food. And they had a very attentive staff, pick up the poo, too many dogs congregating together, get them separated. And unfortunately, about 10% of the dogs had to be kicked out because they're too nasty, including the owner's own dog. I talked to the owner. But this was like a wonderful place for people to get together. They bought some crappy land underneath the bridge next to a train track, some horrible land. They made a nice picnic area under the freeway. And people were having a great time here. Now, one of the things that I worked on, I had a lot of problems with anxiety. And I watched cattle go in a squeeze chute. And I noticed that sometimes they kind of relaxed. So I went and built a squeeze chute myself. I'll show you. But the idea for the thunder shirt for dogs came from my squeeze machine. And so Camille King did another project. She is really the scientist. She really cranks the workout. And where it seemed to really help was with the isolation stress. One of the things that it did is the dog spent less time staring at the door waiting for Camille to come back. And here is the squeezing machine. Now, I used to be where I couldn't tolerate people touching me. But you see, I could control the squeeze machine. And then I've got to where people, I can touch me now, I can tolerate it. You see, you can do some desensitization if you have control. Now, itchy pants against my skin on a plane, no, we're not going there. I've got to find things that itch, and I buy Walmart pants, and I wash them 3 times before I can wear them for any length of time. You know, that's something I need, especially on pants. Shirts, I can wear another shirt under it. But giving the person control, let's go back to those headphones. You can have them with you all the time. Boy, I can tell you, I would have used some headphones last night on that fire alarm, and that would have sent some people into orbit. So you have them with you, so you have the control. For some of the really awful bathrooms, where you've got hand dryers, all these flushers going off at random, yeah, put the headphone on there. Some of the really bad airport bathrooms, yeah, that's a place, put the headphone on. But then other times, have it with you. Then try not to wear it. So you can kind of work on desensitizing. And I had an activist say that I was suggesting that somebody go to a rock concert without headphones. No, rock concert, you can wear the headphones. But the thing is, they got to be off for almost enough time so the brain doesn't get more sensitive. I've heard some real bad horror stories on that. And there's a rear view of that. I built that all myself, so that's some of my skill trades. Yes, and I know how to size that air cylinder so it puts the right pressure on me without busting me or breaking the machine. Now, here's a very interesting paper. Solitary mammals provide an animal model for autism. I really love this paper. Let's look at the cat family. Lions are more social than leopards or panthers. And there's crossover here with autism. Is a leopard got a disability? No. You see, in the mildest forms, autism is just a personality variant. And the thing is, we need our autistic minds. You wouldn't have any computers here, you wouldn't have this laptop, you wouldn't have that TV camera there if you didn't have some autistic thinking. And you need the kind of people like me who can't do algebra to fix things. Yeah, I'm sure Tyson's hiring. And because the kid that's a visual thinker is flunking all the algebra and not, dropping out of school. So I suggested to one of the plants, okay, you go in the Latin community and got this lowriders. Well, why don't you take the cover off so that the plant engineer can see the hydraulics? You'll be hired instantly. Instantly. And this brings up another thing of showing off your work. This is how I sold the jobs. I showed off my work. The other thing is I recognized doors to opportunity. There's a scene in the HBO movie where I go up to the editor of the Farmer Ranchman magazine, our state farm magazine, when I was in my 20s, and I get the editor's card because I knew if I wrote for that magazine, it would help my career. I saw that door, and I started writing for that magazine. It's a very important scene in the movie, and it's absolutely true. And you've got to have the guts to go up there and get the card. Now, let's look at wolves. We've bred dogs to be very social, so when the dog can't get something open, they'll ask people for help. The wolf just goes, figures it out. Another interesting thing is the same gene sequences. They give people this giant computer sitting up top. Yeah, the price for that, it's a messy proposition. All those stem cells growing really quickly. autism, schizophrenia, and epilepsy. Building a big brain really fast, a little messy proposition here. All right, going back to animals. If you force an animal to do something, look at all the stress hormone you get, because they get scared. And when an animal voluntarily cooperates, they don't get scared, so you don't have the stress hormones go up. It's that simple. Here's antelopes that we trained at the Denver Zoo. I worked with Nancy Earlbeck. She was the zoo nutritionist, and we trained antelopes to go in a box and get blood draws and vaccinations. Very, very flighty animal. You had to introduce the sliding door opening, one little step at a time. Like the first day, I opened the door that much, and he goes like that. Orients. Okay, do I freak out now or keep watching? That's all we did that day. Very, very gradual. Train them to the sliding door. That took 10 days. And very specific in their thinking. The other thing is the one veterinarian who'd shot them in the past with a dart gun could never work with our trained animals. He was the bad guy. And in handling, good stockmanship matters. The thing I have found in many things, I don't care if it's animal stuff, I don't care if it's school stuff. People want the thing, the magic new technology, more than they want the management. When I first started my career in animals, I thought I could build a self-managing cattle handling facility. That is rubbish. And during the 80s and the early 90s, I had a lot of equipment out in the beef industry. Half my clients tore it up and wrecked it. And then I'll be telling you about the McDonald's audits. And then we had to teach them how to manage the equipment. But people want the thing more than they want the management. Make sure that an animal's first experience with a new person, a new thing like a horse trailer, or a new place is a good first experience. Because the first experience with something new, if it's bad, they have a hard time getting over it. And that same thing's true with autistic kids. So if they're going to be going to a new school, if they can visit it before they go, that'd be good. If they can't, show the website. Do everything you can to reduce the surprise factor. I've been working with a man who's been starting a travel website to help autistic kids at the airport. What you want to do is reduce the scare factor. But then we got a kid who's never even gone shopping by themselves. No, let's learn that maybe before the airport, where they're getting too over-shouldered. I'm just appalled at the kids. They aren't learning how to do laundry, learning how to do shopping. But you want to reduce the surprises. There's videos on all the security stuff. And they have to understand that maybe the guard might touch them. Usually they don't. But you don't want that surprise coming up. And okay, the airport's a place you can just wear the headphones all the time you're in the airport. You're not there all the time. Okay, and you can zone out on video games on the plane. I don't want any trouble at the airport. But that's a place that you're not at all the time. I want to be very clear about the headphones, because an activist was saying we should just shove them into some noisy thing. No. But on the other hand, you wear headphones all the time, it will make it worse. They've got to be off for a large part of the day, or most of the time. Okay. A horse will often be less afraid of something new if he's with a person that he trusts. Having the owner present at the vet hospital. Well, that helps an animal not get scared. Now, animals make categories. On the leash I protect, off the leash I go play. They make categories. Now, one of the problems I got with a lot of autistic kids is black and white thinking. Everything I learn is by specific example. So, let's learn about good and bad. You can have degrees of bad. Gum on the teacher's chair is not robbing a bank. Okay, you see, you could have different specific examples, degrees of good or bad. And robbing a bank's not as bad as killing somebody. And maybe steal a bag of potato chips from the store, that's slightly worse than gum on a teacher's chair. If I steal a flat screen TV from a store, that's much more bad. But my mind works in specific examples. It's what's called bottom-up thinking. And here's a picture that a young autistic kid sent to me to show how he's categorizing cats from dogs in his mind. Now, when I was a little kid, I separated the cats from dogs by their size until our neighbors got a dachshund. And I had to figure out why the dachshund was not a cat. Well, it barked. It had the nose shape of a dog. You see, I studied it. Categories. That's the beginning of concept formation. All my thinking uses specific examples to form concepts. It's bottom up. And that's how computers think too. So the more things where we get them out doing things, we put more data in the database, then they're going to think in a less rigid way. Bottom up thinking. Animals do it. Autistic people do it. Computers do it. Yeah, what does ChatGPT do if it doesn't have the knowledge in the database? It makes things up. And 2 lawyers got in trouble for presenting fake lawsuits that in court that ChatGPT made up. Okay, just a little bit about cattle handling. This is the thing that I worked on this for years, teaching people basic behavioral principles. Now, one of the things that helped make me be effective in cattle handling, I picked out something specific. I also wrote a lot of articles explaining concepts like the flight zone that you can see in this picture. Lots of how-to practical articles. And I avoid all the abstract political stuff. I avoid that. But I was working on something specific. I'll have someone come to me and say, well, how do I work on social justice? I said, why don't you work on something specific, like using DNA, for example, to show that this prisoner actually did not do the crime. You see, that's something specific that you can work on. It's not some abstract thing just to, agitate about. See, that's the way I work. Very specific things. Well, I go, how are we going to fix the schools? And I'm very concerned about these math kids, 3 of them in a row in the last 2 weeks, school in the UK, 2 in the US. And the kid turned a gigantic behavior problem, got labeled pathological BS disorder before being a behavior problem because they made him do baby math. Come on, people. Get that algebra book out of the attic and give it to that kid. Well, that doesn't cost a thing. That book is free if you just look around. You see, now as I talk about that, I see it. See, for me, nothing's abstract. All right, the flight zone principle. When I walk into the cattle, those black Angus moved away. You see the white one there? He's looking at me. So you have the flight zone when they move away, but you have a zone where they watch you too. And here's the way to get rid of the electric prods, is you quickly walk back by the animals and they go forward. Nice, I have these diagrams all over the place. Getting back to my business, I made a very nice portfolio. I think a lot of these people need to sell their work rather than themselves. Show off your work. This is a drawing that back in the late 80s, I sent to Cargill, and I designed the front end of every Cargill beef plant. Steel and concrete yards, center track restrainer system. You can look that up on Beef Plant Video Tour with Temple Grandin. That drawing right there sold that job. That's selling the work. Oh, and they got that picture too. All right, non-slip flooring essential. Now let's see how good you are at visual thinking. Raise your hand if you saw that that steer was looking at the sunbeam. Yeah. I show this to elementary school kids, they all see it. Yeah, but then I got the non-slip flooring. Yeah, that's super important, but that's a distractor. I've shown this slide to a lot of people. See how obvious that is? Looking right at it. An hour later, that sunbeam may be gone. I already talked about people wanting the thing more than the management. So the other thing that I did that really helped improve animal handling was I developed a very simple measurement system. You need measurement. Because if the police didn't measure speeding and red light running and drunk driving, can you imagine what the freeway would be like? So this is a measurement system for assessing handling. This is now used by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, Beef Quality Assurance. These are actually very good scores. The electric prod average used to be 500%. But you see, you start to measure things like mooing, falling, stumbling, running. Then I can see, am I getting better? Or am I getting worse? Now let's look at this. This is one of the things I'm the most proud of. In 1996, I collected baseline data for the USDA on the percentage of beef plants they could make unconscious 95% of the cattle, single shot, 30%. You know why it was so terrible? Busted equipment. That's management. Then McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's. I trained them how to use the measurement system. And I saw more change because now they had to repair their equipment and manage it, or they get kicked off the approved supplier list. Pure economic power. I have 5 journal articles I wrote on this. In one 6-month period, I had the power of the Golden Arches, Wendy's braids, and the Burger King guy. And you see, they knuckled down and did it. But I didn't ask them to do expensive things. I had a lot of expensive equipment out there that had been torn up and wrecked, which I made them fix. But actually what I did is I bent over backwards to do reverse conflict of interest. When I'm in welfare mode, I try to take whatever they've got there and make it work. Out of 74 beef plants, only 3 had to buy expensive stuff. The other thing that was interesting is when you got the executives of McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy out of the office, and they saw bad stuff, it was just like that show Undercover Boss. Yeah, it was just like that. Now, going back on some other research that I started that was real innovative, this is the original slide from my very first graduate student, and we basically found that cattle that jump around and throw a fit in a squeeze chute had lower weight gains. 25 years ago, this was real radical stuff. I basically started temperament scoring in cattle. Okay, another thing I want to talk about to end up on. You overselect for any single trait, you will wreck your animal, period. I don't care what the trait is. If you overselect for any single trait, you're going to have trouble. Now, the Brahman cattle, if you treat them nice, they like to be stroked. Don't pat animals like this. Stroke them. Don't do this. Stroke them. All right, what are some of the things to measure for animal welfare? Handling scoring. Dairy cattle, swollen legs from stalls that aren't managed right or they're too small. Lameness, difficulty walking. I was out today looking at Tyson's chickens. They were really frisky. And one of the basic things with all animals is having animals that are not lame. I mean, sore legs, sore feet hurt. And we've got some problems now breeding cattle so much for meat. We're getting some leg problems. I like to look at genetics of a farm animal, sort of like a national budget. If I put everything into the meat, milk, or eggs, I shortchange the infrastructure, the skeleton, the heart, reproduction. Maybe also shortchange my military, the ability to fight disease. You know, if you back off just a tiny, tiny bit on the production, you solve a lot of problems. Dirty animals, skinny animals, ammonia levels in buildings. These are very simple things that I can measure. And I've got a paper on animal welfare where I've got all the good scoring tools. A lot of them you can get for free. Now, lameness is a good critical control point because look at all the stuff that can make them lame. I can do the lameness test as a screening, and it's up to the veterinarians and the managers. Find this stuff. Let's breed animals with good leg conformation. And I'm going to bash on dogs just as much as I'm bashing on livestock right now. Yeah, let's breed. Here's a championship steer. That's disgusting. That was a bully. Wouldn't be able to breed very many cows. Here's a pig with a disgusting foot. That's genetic. And that's crooked claw. That's actually that slide's 10 years old. I got to get the new crooked claw in there. It's genetic. Don't breed that kind of garbage. All right, let's get into canines to show you what happens if you overselect for single traits. Years ago, a scientist named Belyev wanted to breed a fur fox that wouldn't bite your hand off. And these snarly fur foxes. So they just started selecting the ones that lick your hand rather than bite it off. Look what they ended up with. A stocky, black and white border collie. That fox, a gray fox, turned into that. Traits are linked in really weird ways that are not totally understood. 30 years ago, there's no way you could have gotten in the pen with these deer. They would have been too wild. All right, now I've got to bash the bulldog. That's what they used to look like. So how'd you get to that monstrosity? Can't breathe, can't walk, has to have all its babies by cesarean. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. 1938, you can look this picture up online. It's called Bulldog's Dilemma. It's a stock photo now. 1938. Look at the difference. You see, they had a verbal standard that talked about a massive head and broad shoulders. Where do you stop? That's what it looked like in 1938. Now here are 2 little pugs. The little tan one can breathe just fine, and the little black one's so flat you can't hardly breathe. You just like this much nose, just a little less extreme, and then it's fine. How about that? Extreme Arabian horse, I think that's revolting. Looks like a seahorse. That's a dished face gone to an extreme. This is what I call bad becoming normal. They slowly get worse, and people don't realize how much worse they've gotten. Okay, when you look at animal welfare, you need to be, we got to prevent suffering. But does the animal have any good times? Do they have any good times? Do they have a life worth living? You want to see a cow having fun, a dairy cow having fun? Go look up motorized rotating brush dairy cows. There's all these YouTube videos. They love them. How about broiler chickens? I went out and saw Tyson's broiler chickens today. Those some other broiler chickens, either Costco's or rotisserie birds. They like to get on that scale and swing on it. Well, a really cool thing that Tyson is doing is they put lights down the feeder line now. One of the things I really like about that is the house is much brighter now. You can actually see the birds. And birds have a natural behavior to eat in the light and then go hide in the bushes. Well, there's no bushes in there. But when you put lights down the feeder line, then the rest of the house is in the shadow. Well, I really, really like this. It's very inexpensive to put in, and the whole house is not as dark. I also found out what great pictures my Apple phone could do, and with fairly low light. I can show those to you at the book table. And there are two of my books right there. They're running out of books, unfortunately. Amazon's got plenty of them. We can leave those up there. And I want to do some questions now. We can do animal questions, autism questions, anything you want to do questions on. Be happy to do it. Okay, now, is there a mic yeah, she's got a mic here. Let's go around with a mic so that people can hear the questions.
Hi, thank you for what you do. So you said that when you stroke an animal, you should stroke it?
Stroke it.
I have a hairless cat that loves slaps.
Well, a hairless cat's kind of a weird animal.
I agree. I've fostered and rescued her.
Okay, but most cats, and see, I went to the World Cup horse show, and they were these dressage horses were all frothing at the mouth and dripping in sweat in an indoor climate-controlled arena. And the one that won, he was scratching it and petting it rather than slapping it, and it wasn't so nervous. But most animals, they interpret this as hitting. And you just make it feel like mom's tongue, and that seems to work. See, the problem is a hairless cat's a really odd animal. And when you breed something that odd, there's no hairless cats of the wild felids, as they're called. None of those are hairless. So maybe there's something with that makes it different. But normally, an animal would prefer to be stroked. Now, I've got two other books here that are textbooks, on animal welfare. But those are my two animal books. And then my autism book that I'm really interested in right now is the visual thinking, where I show the science behind the different kinds of thinkers. That's kind of a white cover. Amazon has it in stock. I checked that today. I can sign some book plates. They didn't order quite enough books. They went and cleaned out Barnes & Noble. That was 9 books. All right, let's get another question.
Hello. As a parent of a daughter on the autism spectrum, who's now 38 years old, and I'm finding that she's wanting to be more neurotypical. Boyfriends. She's talking about marriage.
Well, okay, well, let's work on, one of the big problems with girls is getting into abusive relationships because they want a relationship so bad. And some of the relationships that work the best are friends who shared interest. Now, that's also true for children and high school kids, too. Because I was bullied in school, and the only places I was not bullied was like horseback riding, volleyball, a few things where I did friends who shared interest. And so maybe that's one of the best ways that can work. And I'm really worried about the dating sites and all the trouble you can get into. You don't ever send pictures of your private parts. In fact, I don't like the way my phone sometimes turns the camera on. I don't touch my phone if I'm not completely dressed. And then when I charge it, I shove the camera end into the briefcase. No, it takes pictures just sometimes when I don't expect it. And you can get on a sex offender list if you send those pictures around. Just don't. But let's try to find What does she like to do? Maybe she needs to get involved in something where they can be friends who shared activities. What does she like?
Well, one of the things that she's done is now she has a relationship with a young man in England, and he's recently proposed to her. And so, as a parent, you don't want to jump in there and,
Oh, that's right.
I don't want to overreact and just walking that step. So they're interested in art, and they love to draw, and they talk about all the movies that they enjoy.
They like, okay, that's some shared interest.
I think more than anything else, it's just her creating a dialogue with someone with the same interest.
Well, and that's good. That is something to be,
That's why I'm not, saying, you can't marry a boy that you've never met and you only see on, but she says, he likes me on Facebook.
well, you'd want to get some in-person meetings. I wouldn't do a relationship based on Facebook. But friends who shared interest, some successful marriages I've seen have been two computer programmers getting married. And when they proposed, they went out to a white table restaurant, candles, really romantic. Because you got to have the right stage for a 4-hour discussion on computer data storage systems, because they are just so interesting. Yeah, see, that's an example of shared interest. But they were meeting in person. I'm a little bit worried about something where it's just on Facebook. And then sometimes you've got predators out there that impersonate people. Yeah, I'm a little worried about that. It's in England, where if they got married, one of them's going to have to move somewhere.
Details are not important.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll be real loud. It's over here.
Okay.
Just curious about your thoughts about the current representation of people on the spectrum in popular media, such as shows like Love on the Spectrum.
Well, I think it's good that there's getting to be more and more of that. And one thing about the Claire Danes, portraying me in the movie, she sort of became me. It shows visual thinking accurately. I think it's good that we're getting more things like that. I think that's real good. The other thing, I think, I put a lot of emphasis on career, because what's made my life worthwhile is having an interesting career. Because I've seen individuals where they're getting so hung up on the autism, they don't think about anything else. And I'll think about one case, because my mind thinks in specific examples. About 5 years ago, I had a young man come to me, and he wanted to do an autism documentary, and he sounded really depressed. And then I got to talking to him, and I found out that he had done some of the most beautiful sports photography for major networks. And he said that when he was out there doing that sports photography, autism sort of became a non-issue. And I said to him, you know what I think you need in your life is a lot more sports photography and less autism. And then I found out one of his colleagues just a few months ago, he's doing great now, doing more and more sports photography. I'm not saying totally forget about autism, but for me, career comes first. And I had a chance to go look at Tyson's chickens this morning, because I found out when I got in here last night that I had the morning off. Well, I got to see their chickens, and we had a really good time. And I also think, and when it comes to advocacy, that I'm going to be a better advocate if I have a real job. And I think that's important. I'm still teaching my class in livestock, still doing talks on livestock, still doing things with livestock.
Yes, I had a question. I'm an employment specialist for persons with disabilities, and I have a young client who is 19, and he is doing well in all areas except when I have to give him feedback or criticism, constructive criticism on something perhaps that he needs to improve on or change. He immediately gets very defensive and starts having a little bit of reactionary to me, or a little bit of a meltdown, and I just don't quite, no matter how I approach or try to change my approach to him, I'm just not.
And I had some good job coaches out in the industry. At my very first construction job, I criticized some welding, and I said it looked like pigeon doo-doo. And I remember going pulled into the plant engineer's office in the boiler room, and he didn't scream at me. He said, "Whitey, the welder's up in the cafeteria now. You're going to have to apologize." He very quietly told me what I should do in the moment when Whitey was in the cafeteria. Now, another issue that I had was hygiene, and there's a scene in the movie where a can of deodorant slammed down. That actually happened. And secretaries took me shopping. That actually happened. Because there's some stuff, I dress eccentric, but you can't be a rude, filthy, dirty slob. And so to help you with this, I need to know, like, where do you have to correct him? What kind of stuff? You see, I have to have specifics or I can't help you.
In the interest of time, we will have final question.
Okay, well then I can talk to you over the book table. There's a few more books up there. And I'll sign book plates, and Amazon's waiting to ship right now. Shameless bookseller. I just want to get information out there. And well, I'll tell you what I've done with the book money and the speaking engagement money. I have put 22 graduate students through school. I have three are now professors. And that's what I do with the money for the books and the speaking engagements. Okay.
First off, I found recently I'm on the spectrum, and a lot of these things are kind of becoming very clear to me that weren't. So I really appreciate people that are on the spectrum that kind of just explain their experiences. One of the things that I have a problem with is animals suffering, like big time. Like I would shut down to the idea of animals getting hurt, anything like that. But it's to a point where it's not productive or healthy. So I was just kind of wondering.
Well, where are you seeing animals get hurt?
Oh, I was just saying, like, for example, even the concept of getting hurt, like articles hearing about animals getting hurt, things like that. I just shut down the concept of it so fast that it's not productive. You know,
so if you just read about it, for example.
Yeah, just anything. Even seeing your statistics about how in 96
in 96, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible.
I found myself kind of tearing up just looking at that. I'm like, but that isn't helpful, because that just makes me want to like turn my head to that sort of stuff. It's too much for me, and it just lets those sort of things go unchecked. You're a person that's obviously seen some things. So
I've seen some really bad stuff.
How do you stay present and stay proactive and just keep fighting good fights when it hurts? I know that's a really tough question.
Well, it's hard, and then the thing is, there's some things where let's concentrate on the things where what are you really good at? Let's concentrate on the things you're really good at.
I'm a developer. I have a job.
You're a software developer?
I feel like just as a social activist, you know, you need to stay present with this stuff.
Well, the other thing is you got to pick out what battles and things you're going to fight. You see, I worked on, we're fixing slaughterhouses. Again, that's not the whole world. Right now, I want to help autistic individuals get into great careers. Again, that's not the whole world. I've real targeted things. And some of these activists that just go after stuff in a general way, it's not very productive. I picked out fairly narrow areas where I can do something. Right now, I'm 76 years old, so I'm concentrating. I want to see kids like you get decent jobs. Okay, you're a software developer. You've got a decent job. And you can look at a whole lot of stuff out there and go, the whole world's falling apart. Well, you can't deal with the whole world. You got to pick out something that you can work on. And right now, I try to give out a lot of practical information on getting jobs, like things like the pilot's checklist. I've done enough of these meetings that I know kind of what the critical points are. Oh, those pilot checklists would save countless jobs, because bosses get mad when the directions aren't followed. I can't follow yakety yak yak. And I get a lot of satisfaction when someone comes up and says, well, my kid's got a good job, or my kid did this or that. So, okay, you've got to decide, do you want to work on animal issues or you want to work on computers?
Okay, well, thank you for staying.
There's some things that you get so upset about it, you can't work on it. And then what other things would you be interested? You said you're an activist. What are you an activist about?
Oh, I mean, one thing is, I'm just really big on people just being able to eat hunger. It's just basic things. I don't think it's
Yeah, but you see, okay, there's hunger in the world, but let's look at something specific where you could actually maybe fix something. You see, you look at this in too big of a wide thing, you can't fix anything. I mean, even here in this country, I found out we make beef sticks in our meat slab, and the carton that they're put in, to my horror, I read that something like 20% of kids in Colorado are food insecure, and the only protein they get each weekend is 2 beef sticks out of our meat slab. Okay, that's it. I'm not saying this, and the students in our meat slab make that. That's something, but that does something real. You see, and if enough people do those kind of fairly small things, they add up to really big things. You see, I don't think abstractly. I was sitting in a faculty meeting, and that box was on the table at the faculty meeting, and I read that, and I was shocked. I didn't realize that food insecurity in Colorado was that high. Okay, that's something that our university, our students are doing to help a number of kids at least to have some protein to eat on Saturday and Sunday. These are all free lunch kids, real low income. You see, but that's something that's real that you can actually work on rather than go, oh, everything's terrible. Now, you know what made me think of that? Years ago, there used to be this Save the Children that said, don't try to save the whole world, just save a small piece of it. That'd be one child that you would sponsor. You see, I really like that kind of approach. So maybe we can just end on that. And I just want to thank everybody for coming.